Life knows how to throw us challenges, especially financial ones. So at some point, you might hit a rough patch, and sometimes money problems can linger for years. But while it's easy to blame these on circumstances beyond our control, this isn't always the case. And sometimes our actions contribute to ongoing problems. So with all that being said, in no particular order, I've narrowed down a few things that I believe could potentially solve about 80% of money problems. Number one, looking for negative spending patterns. This refers specifically to recurring habits or tendencies that trigger problems, which can include shopping without a list, shopping with friends, or prioritizing short-term gratification over long-term financial stability. And I purposely put this at the top of the list because I feel that this keeps a lot of people stuck. But the tricky part is that it's not always obvious. When we talk about negative spending patterns, these don't only refer to big or expensive purchases. These can also include a series of small things that happen over time, where if you're not careful, they can actually continue the cycle of debt, limit financial freedom, and prevent you from saving as much as you possibly could. So this is where some serious self-reflection comes into play, and you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. For example, how many times do you eat out a week? Is it once or twice or practically every day? Additionally, how often do you make purchases on a whim without considering the long-term consequences? Also, do you feel like you have to constantly upgrade your gadgets even though the ones you have are functioning just fine? And no, these conversations are not fun. And when it comes to money, some people avoid the hard discussions, but it's only by having these conversations that you can learn about behaviors that could potentially hold you back. And from there, you can then take steps to become a more conscious spender, which will ultimately help you regain control of your money. In addition, you might be able to save your money problems by setting a realistic budget, and the key word here is realistic. I think most people know the importance of having a budget or spending plan, but creating one is only part of the equation. Budgets are notorious for failing, and when they do, some people will throw their hands in the air and swear that they don't work. But oftentimes, the problem isn't the budget, it's the person behind it. Many people make the mistake of creating a budget that doesn't accurately represent their income or expenses. So in other words, they start off on the wrong foot. And to give you an example of unrealistic budgeting, this is pretty much the equivalent of following the 50-30-20 budgeting rule without really taking into consideration your personal circumstances. Now, I do like this model and I think it serves as a great guide. And if you're not familiar with this, it involves spending no more than 50% of your take-home pay on needs, 30% on wants, and 20% on savings and debt repayment. But one thing you have to remember about this budgeting plan is that it's only a guide. And the reality is a lot of people are currently spending more than 50% of their take-home pay on needs. And after you run the numbers, you might find that you're spending 60% or maybe 70% on needs. And if that is the case, you have to be realistic and realize that even though a 50-30-20 budgeting plan might sound good and it might look good on paper, it's not realistic for you. And no matter how you work the numbers, it's not going to happen. So you have to figure out a plan that makes sense for you, which will involve tweaking some of the percentages. So instead of 50-30-20, you might have to do 60-30-10. You can also solve some of your money problems by creating a plan to grow your income. It's perfectly normal to vent about money problems, housing costs, and inflation. It's all very frustrating, and sometimes you need a release. But while it's okay to acknowledge difficulties and challenges, at some point you have to realize that complaining doesn't always bring about change. I had this conversation with someone recently, and the sad reality is that life will only continue to get more expensive. Now, that's not to say that things will not improve a little, but overall, prices do tend to increase. And oftentimes, the average income, it isn't enough to keep up. So if you feel that you're falling behind or that your income isn't enough, you really only have two options. You can either do nothing, in which case things might stay the same and you continue to fall behind, or you can focus on finding solutions. And this often involves actively seeking ways to increase your income. And unfortunately, this isn't an overnight fix. Whether you're looking for better job opportunities, starting a side hustle, or learning new skills that can lead to higher paying roles, it all takes time. But even though most people cannot immediately solve an income problem, the important thing here is that you're being proactive. So you're taking steps in the right direction. And this might be something that you have to seriously consider looking into, because for some people, increasing their income is going to be the only way that they're able to manage money problems and inflation. Having a what if fund can also solve a lot of money problems. When I think back to some of my most stressful financial moments, I realize that had I had an emergency fund or a rainy day fund at that time, that would have made all the difference in the world, even if it was only a small fund. But sometimes with some people, there is a tendency to think that saving money isn't worth it if they can't do a lot. But I'm here to tell you, that type of thinking will only make your life harder and more expensive. And I understand that you can only do what you can afford to do. But even if you're not in a position to quickly save a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, you should set a goal to do what you can, even if it's only a 1 month safety net. Always remember that something is better than nothing. And I know from personal experience that when you don't have a safety net and you have absolutely nothing to fall back on, even the most minor unexpected expense, like a parking ticket, can seem like the most stressful thing in the world. Another thing that can solve a lot of money problems is to pay off credit cards. Credit cards have a lot of people in a chokehold, and some people might shrug it off and think that, everyone's in debt, so it doesn't really matter. But if you carry high balances from month to month, credit cards are considered one of the worst types of debt because 1, it's expensive, and 2, once you get into it, it is very hard to dig yourself out. Between high rates and only paying the minimum, these balances can snowball quickly. And the more credit card debt you have, the more it can drain your income. Plus, high balances can have a negative effect on your credit score, making it harder to qualify for loans or get favorable rates. So to start eating away at your balances, you need to gather all your credit card statements so that you can understand exactly where you stand. From here, you should aim to pay more than the minimum required. It also helps to use a credit card payoff calculator to estimate the time it'll take to pay off your balances. You can also solve some of your money problems by setting SMART financial goals, which are those that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So looking at an example of what not to do, when someone wants to buy a house, they might set a non-specific goal and say something like, I want to buy a house one day, and leave it at that. Now, at first glance, nothing might seem wrong with that statement. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll notice some problems with this. And one problem being that it's not action-oriented. So it doesn't lay out any steps or guidelines on how to achieve the big picture. So using the same scenario, an example of a SMART goal would be, over the next 3 years, I'm going to save $20,000 for a down payment by contributing $550 per month to a dedicated savings account. And you're more likely to make headway with this approach because, as you can see, the new goal is specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant to the objective of buying a home, and it's time-bound. And finally, you can solve the majority of your money problems by cutting back on unnecessary spending and actually saving the difference. The fact that you're willing to reduce expenses where you can is commendable, and it shows that you're proactive. However, some people make the mistake of not taking full advantage of saved money. But whether you cancel a gym membership, you cancel Netflix, or you're able to take $20 off your weekly grocery bill, one thing to keep in mind is that a savings is only a savings when you actually save the money. Because if you're able to negotiate a better rate for cable and you leave that money in your checking account, there is a good chance that you're going to spend that savings on some unintended purchase. So if you know that you're going to save $100 a month after shopping around and getting a lower price for cable or maybe insurance, what you can do is set up a recurring automatic transfer from checking to savings in this amount. This creates a physical and mental separation that ensures that your savings remains untouched, which can help create a bigger safety net. So that's all that I have for you guys today. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and also subscribe if you like personal finance and you want to see more videos like this. I typically post on the weekends, so thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days.